So, Matt, you have a big story coming out in Wired in another month. Care to tell us what it's about?
Yeah, I mean, I've got basically a feature media piece coming out next month, looking at sort of how media is working, or how people are doing sort of different things on mobile and social, and also sort of what the role of individuals is and voices. One of the companies I talked to was First Look, which was
Had some interesting times lately.
yeah.
And another one that you talked to is BuzzFeed.
Right.
Care to tell us your big news for those who don't know?
I accepted a job as BuzzFeed's San Francisco bureau chief, so I'm heading there in a couple of weeks.
So it's exciting news. 20 editorial staff coming on to work in San Francisco.
That's right. 8 to 10 of those will be tech focused, and folks want to be sort of overseeing everything.
So I guess in reporting out how they're doing, they must have persuaded you that they're doing a pretty good job.
I think you can say that. Yeah. I mean, I should be clear. Like, I didn't start talking to them about the job until after I finished the story. But yeah, I mean, they're doing great, and I think one of the reasons they're doing great is they figured out how to leverage social really well. And I think one of the things they figured out that you've probably seen is that people aren't necessarily coming to the front pages of sites anymore. They're coming in through Facebook, they're coming in through Twitter, they're coming through these different avenues that we used to always depend, and we see this at Wired, we used to always depend on front page traffic, on readers coming to the Wired.com or MotherJones.com and looking down the list of stories on the front page and clicking on one of them. But now, I share a story on Facebook, and people come in sideways, and they may go to other stories they may not.
Yeah, what percentage of folks do you think come in through Wired.com's front page, or any of its front pages?
We have an unusually high percentage. I don't know what it is exactly, but it's high. It's more than, and I say high, it's like more than half, which I think is unusual now.
I think ours is down to 20%.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, okay. We have a very, for whatever reason, we have a very high percentage of that, and I think that's something that I would love to know why, actually, because I know that when I was at Gizmodo, for example, it was definitely coming down the whole time I was there.
And does that mean also that the traffic is still more desktop than mobile?
At Wired, it is. Yeah, it is. But I think that's unusual as well. I mean, I think that a lot of places now are seeing. You look at I remember seeing a slide. Matt Howey, who's the founder of Metafilter, showed a slide at a conference a couple of years ago showing Metafilter's desktop traffic was going and the mobile traffic going up, and was sort of explaining the problems that was creating for him with ads, and which got very bad for him after a while. And I think that's a common. So you guys are doing great, though, right?
Yeah, and well, in that regard, great sort of a mixed blessing. I mean, we've just surpassed, mobile is now surpassing desktop,
Yes.
which is good because our readers are reading us on mobile, and we're not losing readers, we're gaining readers, kind of hand over fist, but is not as great in terms of the advertising revenue for all the reasons that you guys know. It's just not as profitable, basically. So that's something we have to figure out. I think it's something everyone's going to have to figure out, how to adjust to the new revenue models that the technology is presenting us.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about today was if you could tell us the story of the Mitt Romney video and what type of long-term effect that had, because it certainly created a clear spike in traffic, right? If you don't know what I'm talking about, Mother Jones, during the last election cycle, had a video of Mitt Romney at a dinner party being Mitt Romney.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably you guys all know about it, the 47% video. So, so the backstory about that is basically David Korn got that video from the source that is now out as Scott Prouty, because of the great reporting he had done. The immediate impact was semi-insane. For one thing, our site didn't crash. That was pretty remarkable. We had just put a whole bunch of bandwidth and technology into place, and thank God. Because when I went home that night, I remember going to sites around the world, to the Australian papers, to Le Figaro, to Pravda, and it was front page news on all of those papers. So there was a huge traffic spike, obviously, for a few days. I think what's interesting that we saw is that there was a spike, but pretty quickly that spike became the norm. And now we are consistently double or maybe even triple that spike, which for us at the time was a huge peak. And I think what that bodes for everyone long term is if you get people in to the social feeds particularly, that they stay, that you become part of their diet.
And so these are not like homepage traffic visitors, right? These are
No, well, I mean, I couldn't shake it all out exactly, but I mean, the parallel trend is for us to be more mobile and way more social.
Yeah.
Like I said, I mean, the overwhelming part of our traffic comes from social.
Facebook, Twitter,
both. Facebook, the big driver. We have constant debates over where it starts. Sometimes I see it starting on Twitter and then switching over to Facebook. But in terms of volume, Facebook is the delivery device, which I think is true for most people.
I think it's true for most people, yeah. Do you think that stories now sort of live independently of their publications?
Sorry?
Do you think that stories now tend to live independently of their publications?
I think some stories do, and a lot of that traffic is flyby. So I think the sort of conversion to a repeat user is obviously the thing that we're all trying to get. I think, like us, and I'm sure for Wired, we see a lot of people kind of engaging in certain verticals, for lack of a better description, certain parts of our topic, and sometimes down to an individual story as well.
So you guys are hiring, right? Which is unusual in this day and age.
Well, not so much right now. I mean, now we're back to rooftop parties at the industry standard. I feel like there's this huge boom going on in journalism. But when Monica and I took over, it was basically the bottom had just fallen out. So we've managed somehow to steadily grow. We used to be 15 editorial employees, now we're 45, and the company is about 85 people, I think, at this point. So we're growing at a pretty good natural rate, but we are hoping in a sort of nonprofit way to do what VC money does for places like BuzzFeed and do a big sort of capital campaign and grow faster than we can grow organically. That's something that we're hoping to do in about a year or so.
What are the advantages of being a nonprofit media organization?
I think the advantage is revenue diversification. I think the thing that worries me for media in general is that too much of the revenue is being tied up in one or two sources. So for us, we have like 40,000 readers give more than that. Some give a lot more. Some just give $5 or whatever. But it allows us to kind of do that NPR type model that you guys know from being harassed during Pledge Week to a certain extent.
I thought it was a Wikipedia model, actually.
Yeah, right. So I mean, and that just allows us to have another stool, another leg to the stool, in addition to display, print advertising, print subs, and some other stuff.
Are you seeing advertising changing? Like, one of the things that I keep hearing about is visibility, and the advertisers putting an emphasis on making sure that not just the ad loads, but that people see the ad.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it's something we more see on the horizon and are getting. They want to be above the fold. I think that's sort of it. But what's coming, I think, for all of us, and I'm sure BuzzFeed is somewhat immune to this, I guess, with the native advertising model, but is how the ad will follow the reader. So you could do that structurally on some sites. There might be other ways to do it, but like how long the reader has a chance to engage with the ad. But I'm curious, like, what you think of the native model, and if that is a better, better solution, right? Gotta do that now.
I don't know. I don't know. I like being on the edit side of things and not having to worry about that so much. I do think that people, if you're on the edit side, you don't know how the organization you're working for is making money. I think that's dumb, because you need to know if the organization you're working for is going to be around. I like not having to get hung up on viewability and things like that you probably do, but I think that when I go to a site and I have to, like, a page loads and I have to dismiss an ad, and another ad pops up and I have to dismiss that ad, it's very frequently I don't end up getting to the article that I'm being threatened with ads with before I can read it. And I do think that when, that a native advertising model that lets people sort of read it if they're interested in it, whether or not it's, they care if it's an ad, maybe whether or not they know it's an ad, is a way that you can sort of accomplish those same goals of getting, advertising money to support your publication without having to piss off your readers. I mean, I don't want to I wouldn't say this if I hadn't said it publicly last week, but I went to read a story in the Atlantic last week, and I had to dismiss 3 giant ads on the website before I could get to the actual story I wanted to read, and I only did that because I really, really wanted to read the story, and if you don't really, really want to read the story, who's gonna do that?
No, I agree, and I mean, as a nonprofit, we also, sometimes run our own, Give Us Money ads, in addition to getting ads from other nonprofits that also are doing that. So it can be frustrating, particularly at the end of the year, which is a big kind of push for all of that stuff. But I think readers do get sick of that clicking things away. I don't know if they'll tire of the native advertisement, or if that's just the sort of trajectory of growth that BuzzFeed is betting on, just the volume of stuff and the volume of staff.
I don't know. I mean, I will say that I do think that there is sort of a difference between doing a native ad that in some way is fun and maybe makes sense in the format versus doing something that might be misinterpreted as a very strong editorial endorsement as an article. I mean, we've, in the magazine industry, we've had native ads forever, basically. We call them native ads, but they look like articles, and in some cases are, it's almost easy to make a mistake that it is an article that was written by and endorsed by the media organization, whoever that is that you're reading. And so, if there's a native ad that is doing that, I think that's kind of the thing that might be a bad idea. But if it's a native ad that's here's 50 types of toilet paper from Charmin, I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing.
Shall we gossip about First Look?
Yeah, let's. Right?
Okay. So I'm curious.
So you know a lot of the people there, too, right?
I do know, yes, we know.
Or increasingly few, as everyone does, right?
Fewer of them actually work there. I mean, I'm curious what you think, kind of having reported that right as Tybee was leaving, what you think about the ability of the Intercept part of the project to go on.
I mean, it seems like they're in deep trouble to me. I think that First Look is the Pierre Omidyar backed enterprise that started with Glenn Greenwald-based publication called The Intercept. Basically, Omidyar was a fan of Greenwald, and decided that he would could build this publication around him. Initially, they had some very grand ambitions. They were going to be like the New York Times of
right.
new
And
media.
there was claims made not by Pierre initially, which has always been sort of interesting, that they were going to invest $250 million a year in journalism, which is a lot.
Yeah. But then apparently they tried to manage it like a Silicon Valley startup, and for the second publication they had, The Racket, that just didn't work, and Tybee walked, and it seemed like they didn't have a plan B, and the whole thing fell apart, and and now all that staff is having to find new jobs who they'd hired for the bring on The Racket. Meanwhile, The Intercept lost its editor in John Cook, who's now gone back to Gawker, and how do you start, once you've gone through that, I think the real problem is how do you then bring on new people, and how do you convince, if there is going to be a second publication or a third publication, how do you convince people to do that? They're still sitting, I assume, on a mountain of stuff that Greenwald has yet to publish.
Well, really interesting question. Is there a ton left? Is it stuff that there's a lot of volume, but the ROI for sifting through what's left is just remarkably high? I mean, and do the other media organizations that helped him birth those stories, be it the Post or the Guardian or the Times, do they want to and can they provide support to that now? It's all very murky, and it also just seems like fundamentally just a phenomenal culture clash, and a company being planned on the back of a cocktail napkin, and the fact that Omidyar and Glenn Greenwald have still never met in person is just
That's weird.
shockingly weird.
Yeah, it's very strange. I mean, to some extent, you can blame that on Greenwald's presence in Brazil and ability to, probably, is he unable to come to the United States at this point? I'm not sure.
Omidyar has 2
But
jets
Omidyar can go there.
himself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Yeah.
No, and I think what's interesting about it is, the joke about the industry standard I made earlier, who knows, First Look may pull out of this death spiral and reorganize itself in another way. They certainly have a lot of money. If Omidyar stays interested, all things are possible. But I think what's so fascinating is there's so much experimentation going on, and not just in startups. I think it's really, the sort of trope that old media doesn't get the internet and doesn't get social, I think is mostly long since dead. Some of the most interesting experiments going on now and most successful things are being done within old media companies. So there's a lot of...
For example,
I think the Upshot in some way is doing a better or equal task
you think they're
to
better
what
than Fox? Yeah,
Fox is doing, and I think the Post is launching a bunch of new initiatives, some of which are out and some of which are still being worked on. But that kind of journalism, I think, is being implemented with technological grace as well as deep bench of reporting power at some of these places that maybe needed to be dragged to it, but are in it now.
I do think, going back to First Look, but I do think they had one thing very right, though, which is that, previously, like, these big institutions, these old media institutions, if you want to call them that, gave authority to their writers, still do, but increasingly, like, writers, individuals have their own authority, and they can take it place to place with them. And, like, Glenn Greenwald is Glenn Greenwald, no matter if he's at First Look, or if he's at The Guardian, or if he's at Salon. He's Glenn Greenwald, and he's going to have his readers and people who are passionate about him. And that's like a fundamental difference, right? That wasn't the case 10 years ago, was it?
I don't know. Is it that different than, say, Robert Benchley and Dorothy Parker at the New Yorker and the, I think there's always been sort of voice and fans and that kind of DNA and individual brands within some of these bigger entities. It's certainly what sort of premier magazines have always done. I think now they're more portable in a way, or the transmission method is different a little bit.
Well, had Dorothy Parker, say, taken off for, I don't know,
Harper's.
Yeah, sure, Harper's or right, because fuck the internet. I don't think she would have been able to take her audience with her in the same way. Like the New Yorker would have still had, subscribers who were, readers who were New Yorker readers who weren't necessarily, or there to be, there because they knew about Dorothy Parker necessarily.
Yes, but I think if they followed her to a new place, they might still read the New Yorker, right?
Right.
I guess that's an interesting question of, are people just going for one writer or one vertical at any of these properties? I think sometimes that's true, but maybe not as often as we writers and editors would like to think.
I feel like it's pretty common practice now to like follow writers via Twitter, or follow writers via Facebook fan pages, to like follow writers via having an if this then that recipe type, that's like the RSS feed.
Right. So the corporate brand, the publication brand is more in the background than those people.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not that it doesn't matter, but it's like
right.
but the individual certainly has an authority today, I think, due to social and that they didn't used to.
Yes, it's sort of like the Borg, I guess. They all add up into the entity that is, BuzzFeed or Mother Jones or whatever it is. But yes, I think that is a power that writers have, and it offers a really interesting way to engage in audience development and down to really understanding why that writer, why that audience, which perhaps can be replicated with somebody else or perhaps not.
So we're running up to the Q&A time, but golden age of journalism, death spiral of journalism right now?
I kind of always think it's both at the same time. I mean, I think the ongoing issue is how are we going to pay for the premier stuff?
Yeah.
And, you know, that sometimes there's going to be a lot of crap produced to support a slice of premier journalism. Sometimes we might persuade readers to kind of pay more in different ways. I mean, I think all those kind of revenue experiments are almost more vital than the sort of content presentation layer experiments. And I don't know that anyone's really hit on an answer that has been proven over time.
Yeah. Cool. Questions?
Okay, how does the emergence and success of reblogging aggregate sites changing digital media?
You know, I mean, I feel like that's almost less of a problem than it was a year or two ago, even. Maybe not, maybe I'm kidding myself. Wired kind of, we basically kind of decided that we weren't going to do that. Like if somebody else had news and we didn't have anything to add, we weren't going to do it because we weren't seeing value in it. Like it was a waste of our time. It was a waste of our resources. And, you know, I mean, I don't know, how do you feel about it? I feel like it's a declining problem, not an increasing one.
Yeah, I mean, I feel it's a problem in my feed when I see like 5 different places kind of turn out similar stuff, and everyone's trying to add a little bit something, but
Yeah.
I wish I knew before I click through which one was the best one to read, I guess, which, you know, I think there probably are social helps with that, but it also kind of perpetuates the replication problem.
I mean, there are some places that like definitely, I mean, they're full on into that, and they basically take your wonderful story and pull the heart out of it and stick it on their page, and like that sucks. But
Yeah,
I
that
don't know.
sucks.
It just happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, if the volume game becomes less of the driving factor, which it may or may not, there'll be less of that.
Hope so.
Okay, what are the types of digital publications that will succeed and why?
Well, Mother Jones,
BuzzFeed.
Wired. So yeah, I don't know. I think. I think places. I mean, going back to sort of that last thing, I think the places that the key thing that makes something to succeed is having original, quality, solid editorial. Like it's still the foundation for everything else. I mean, I think you can't be like Harper's and say "fuck the internet," which is, I mean, literally like what I believe Harper's has on their softball jerseys is "fuck the internet" on the back of it. But I mean, if you're doing quality reporting and you have a good distribution method, I mean, you can be smarter about distribution by embracing social, embracing mobile. I think as long as you have a good ad sales team too, you're going to be all right. I mean, that's the foundation.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I'll just make my pitch that I think readers have to be persuaded that if you're going to spend $120 for your cable bill or however much else, like, you can figure out a way to support the things that you care about. They don't all have to be nonprofit. You can do it by other means for a lot of these places, but ultimately, if people want good stuff, they're going to have to help make that happen. What are the major revelations you made in your future of media story?
I mean, I'm not sure how surprising it would be to a lot of people here, but you know, basically, I was looking at the ways that various publishers are using strategies and tactics to gain readers on mobile and social. One of them was Circa, who I talked to pretty extensively. Matt Galligan was speaking here earlier today. But you know, I mean, it's basically a lot of what I think it comes down to is trying to embrace novel ways to get that audience and grow that audience. Like when you're talking about the Mitt Romney video, I mean, like, you do have to grow the audience, and like because there's so much coming at us all the time, the only way to effectively do that is to embrace novel ways. And you can read the rest in January.
That's a good question, which is basically what big shifts will journalists have to make in the years to come? Like new skills, new voice?
I don't know. I mean, I think it helps to be specialized, to some extent. I do think that's increasingly important, especially when you're kind of getting off the ground. Having a beat, owning it, being able to really be a trusted person covering that beat. I think once you get a little more established, you can kind of start to grow beyond your specific beat. But owning a beat is still, I think, the foundational skill for a journalist, no matter if they're just reporting on Facebook, or if they're within Facebook, or if they're writing for a national magazine or newspaper or something.
So I'm just going to ask you one last question about the new gig, which is, there's a lot of tech reporting. A lot of it is based here. What do you want to do that's not being done, either in terms of types of coverage or perhaps style of coverage?
I think we want to do a lot more investigative stuff. I think we want to try and find novel ways to tell stories, novel ways to present them, which I think kind of remains to be seen how that's going to ultimately look. I think that the big idea though is we don't want to treat technology as a subject unto itself. We don't want to think of technology like we think of music journalism, and people often compare technology journalism to music journalism in the 70s. They're like, oh, well, we're in the tech journalism today is like music journalism in the 70s, but it's not, because, in the 70s, your granddad wasn't listening to Led Zeppelin, but he probably has an iPhone, and I think that's a, just a kind of a different way of looking at it, is not looking at it as a separate topic, but as a topic that touches everything that we do.
It seems like a lot of technology coverage, less so than was true even a couple years ago, but still kind of suffers from the fanboy quality to it. Do you think that there's room to be skeptical, and what tone of skepticism, not just of technology, but of be it companies or policies or
it's fucking
practices.
old having everybody say we're changing the world, right? We're fucking changing the world. We're changing the world. Fuck that. No, you're not. You have a fucking app that lets people, I'm sorry. But I didn't mean to swear like that. But on the other hand, if you're not enthusiastic about it, why are you there? And so generally technology is changing the world. Sometimes that's for the worse. For everything that the iPhone has done to connect us, or Android phones or smartphones, what you want to call them, there bad things happening to the planet because we have so many of them, and there are bad things happening to in certain segments of society, and especially in Asia where they're being produced. And I think that you can balance those things out. You don't have to take a strictly enthusiastic or a strictly yeah, I think so. Yeah, right. Yeah. So so I think that's the idea, right? Because you don't have to just do one or the other.
All right. Well, that is the end of our discussion. Thank you so much, Matt. Congratulations.